Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeat Ron, and today we're going to be going over the updated build for the Deepcore 40mm PGL, the grenade launcher for Engineer. This is Engineer's first secondary, so I'm going to be going over 3 builds without overclocks, and then I'm going to be going over the builds that I use with each of the overclocks. So first up is going to be my general purpose build, and then we'll have an AoE build and a just direct damage build for the grenade launcher. So let's go over the options we have in tier 1. First up, we have increased AoE. This increases our AoE by an extra meter, so we go from having 3 meters of effective radius up to 4 meters. This can be pretty useful. A larger explosion radius is both a good and a bad thing because it's easier to damage yourself and damage friends with, but it hits more enemies, so if you're being safe with it, it can be pretty useful. Up next, we have extra ammo. This gives us 2 more max ammo, so we go from 8 to 10. Great, means we get more ammo from resupplies, and means we can use our grenade launcher more often. And then our last option is the HE compound, giving us 20 more area damage, so we go from 110 to 130. Also really good, makes it so we can kill things a little bit more consistently and deal a bit more damage to things on the outside of the explosion radius. Usually I go with extra ammo here. I just like using the grenade launcher more, so having more ammo is just really useful for me. In tier 2 we have extra ammo again, same as in tier 1, so also good. And then we also have larger payload, which is the same that we also have in tier 1. So with this, I usually go with extra ammo. Again, I like having those extra shots. So in this case, we have 12 total ammo. So every time we get a resupply, we'll get 6 ammo back from that. Pretty nice, as opposed to the initial 4 that we would get. So we're getting 2 more with each resupply if you're calling down resupplies fairly often. This will add up over time, but if you want to go with extra damage is great too. In tier 3, we have Incinerary Compound. So with this, we lose out on half of our direct and area damage, as well as our armor, but this is converted to heat so we can ignite enemies quicker. This one can be really useful. This one kind of got indirectly buffed with the new weapons that were added, because fire does help the corrosive sludge pump quite a bit, and it will help the Block 1 smart rifle. With the smart rifle, you have one of your mods that can give you 20% more damage when an enemy is on fire, and 20% more damage when an enemy is electrocuted. And these one stack, so you can have an enemy that is on fire and being electrocuted and deal even more damage to it. As well as if you have a driller with a corrosive sludge pump, the sludge is flammable. So any sludge that's left on the ground, if you shoot a grenade in the general area of it, it will probably light it on fire, and this will deal even more damage over time and make it easier for your team. Our second option is Pressure Wave. This increases our armor breaking, so we go from the base amount of armor breaking up to 500% more, so we can blow apart the armor on like guards and Praetorians very easily. This doesn't affect any amount of armor that's unbreakable though, so like Oppressor or the front armor on a Dreadnought, we can't break that, and this isn't going to give us any more damage from that. And then our last option is the High Velocity Grenade. This increases the speed of our grenade by 180%. This one can be pretty useful just because it makes it easier to hit wherever you're trying to hit with the grenade launcher. Once you get used to the grenade launcher though, it does feel kind of weird switching to this one, or vice versa if you get really used to this one and switch back to the regular rate of the grenade launcher. This makes so you don't have to arc your shots as much because the velocity will make up the distance. So that can be useful, and if you're struggling with hitting enemies at distance and you still want to try to hit them at a distance with the grenade launcher, this one's a pretty good option. Usually I go with the Pressure Wave here for my general purpose build, just so that I can fire this directly at like Praetorians, knock their front armor off and make it easier to hit their backside. It's also kind of useful in crowds because with this build, you're usually not killing like guards with one shot in any sort of horde or anything like that. You're killing like the regular grunts most of the time, and you're dealing pretty high damage to the slashers. But this just kind of breaks up the armor a little bit more on there, making it easy to follow up with whatever your primary weapon is. In tier 4, we have Homebrew Explosive. This is Homebrew Powder. This randomizes your damage, so you get anywhere between 80% damage on each of your shots, up to 140% damage, which equalizes at 110% of your base damage. So most of the time you're going to be getting a bonus from this. Now this amount of damage I don't find to be super impactful with the regular grenade launcher, at least the way that I've built it here. With certain overclocks, it's pretty useful. I really like it there. And if you're going full damage on the grenade launcher, this is a pretty good choice. In tier 4, we have Nails and Tape. This gives us extra AoE radius by 1. Great, same thing as our tier 1 option. And then we have our Concussive Blast. So this makes it so any creature stuck within the blast radius of our explosive is stunned for 3 seconds. This is pretty useful because you're not going to be killing things like Praetorians with this if you shoot them in the face or something. But if you do stun them, that makes it very easy for you to rotate around them and either hit them in the back with another grenade or follow up with whatever your primary weapon is. You can use your pickaxe power attack back there. It's also great for hordes because any stunned enemies are pretty easy targets for the rest of your team and just for you and your turrets in general. And in this one, I kind of switch between either Nails and Tape or Concussive Blast. It kind of depends what I want. If I want to do a bit more damage to crowds, the nails and tape is better. If I want to help out the team more and kind of slow things down though, concussive blast is a great option too. And then in tier 5, our options are proximity trigger. This makes it so once you shoot a grenade near something, you don't have to hit it directly, but it will blow up. This makes it really easy to hit things like Mactera, which fly around erratically. So if you just fire it in the general area of a Mactera, you will probably get to where it explodes. However, your grenades no longer detonate on impact with surfaces. They just detonate after a set amount of time. This can result in some unfortunate events if you manage to lob a grenade somewhere and it rolls near an ally and then blows up, or potentially blows you up. I've seen that happen a couple of times. It's not super common, but it can happen. And if you find yourself not hitting enemies directly or just getting really close, you're maybe messing with like the high velocity grenades, this one can help because there's more room for error. Our second option is the most straightforward option here. This is sticky grenade. This gives us 60 more damage when we directly impact something with a grenade launcher. Pretty good. I like using it. It's definitely a go-to if you don't know what else to take. And then our last option is the disabled inertia inhibitor. This one is a really weird one. What this one does is it transfers your momentum to the grenade. So you can kind of bend the grenade or bend the arc of the grenade in a certain way. It's kind of fun to use, but it's very weird and not very consistent, at least in my experiences, because it feels so odd. It's not a bad thing, but it's kind of a weird thing to use. I guess if you want to go for like some grenade trick shots, you can kind of use this and bend it around structures that you would otherwise just slam the grenade directly into. But for my usual grenade build, I usually go with sticky grenade. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just trying to hit something directly, break up its armor, stun it, and then I've got plenty of extra grenades. Now the next build I'll go over is the AoE build. So this is just, you want a big explosion radius. For this I like going with the fragmentation rounds in tier 1, going with extra ammo in tier 2. In tier 3 I like going with the incendiary compound. This way we spread out more fire damage, and this is more of a crowd control build rather than a big target build. You could go with like the armor breaking here if you want that on top of this, and that works just fine. I go with the nails and tape in tier 4, so we have an even bigger explosion radius. Sometimes I switch to concussive blast though too, because concussing everything and lighting everything on fire is pretty useful. Makes it so that it's guaranteed that nothing's going to be attacking me, at least in that area, for the next 3 seconds, and they're probably going to die or slowly die over time from the fire. It's also really good if you combine it with the sludge pump like I said before. And then I go with the proximity trigger in tier 5. This is just so I don't need to be all that accurate. And so long as I fire pretty much near a group of enemies, it's going to go off and probably spread fire to all of them. I like this build a lot. I think that it's a pretty strong build, at least for crowd control. Not so much if you want to be killing like big things like Praetorians and Oppressors with it. It can still work, but it's not going to work as well, at least outside of a team. And then I'll go over the damage build. For the damage build, you can either go with either one of these in tier 1 or 2. I don't like taking both of them for the damage. You could, but I feel like that's a little bit overkill, and I feel like the extra ammo is more useful. So whichever one you want, you can build like this or the other way around. In tier 3, going with the armor breaking, this way I can just hit things directly in the face if I need to, like the Praetorians or like the guards or whatever it might be. Going with the homebrew powder, so we get even more damage, or more than likely more damage than we already do. And then going with the spiky grenade, so we get that extra damage on top of there. The extra damage from this is also affected by the homebrew powder, so this can kind of high roll there too. So we get a little bit more direct damage to enemies. This can kill big things like Oppressors and Praetorians pretty fast. It can kill menaces relatively quick too. These are the builds that I usually run with the grenade launcher when I'm not running overclocks. Now let's go over each of the overclocks, because the grenade launcher has some really cool ones. First up, we have Clean Sweep, and this one gives us more area damage and a bigger effect radius. This overclock, like many of the clean overclocks, works with any of those builds that I just recommended. Personally, I like the damage build for this one, so going something like this. Really, homebrew explosive or concussive blast is pretty good here. I've switched between the two, and then spiky grenade. So I might run something like this. Gives you a decent amount of damage, gives you good armor breaking. Our second overclock is probably one of the most basic overclocks in the entire game. This is Pack Rat. So this gives you 2 more ammo, and that's it. So you get either your tier 1 or your tier 2 with ammo. So if you wanted to go full damage build, you could go something like this, and that's pretty good. You could go with an AoE build and go something along these lines again. That works just fine. You could add like the stun to it. It'll be a little bit more consistent. You could go all ammo, have the stun, have the fire, and have the proximity trigger, or have the spiky grenade. Really, you can build whatever the heck you want on Pack Rat, and it'll work just fine. This is nothing but a bonus to you. So whatever your favorite build is for the grenade launcher, it will work with Pack Rat. Assuming one of your favorite builds isn't like one of the more specific overclocks. That was a very quick explanation of these two. They're pretty straightforward though. Increased damage or extra ammo. For our first balanced overclock, we have compact rounds. This lowers our damage by 10, which is not that much, but we get 5 more ammo in total. So we go from 8 to 13. And our effect radius is a little bit smaller. We lose out on 0.5. This one, to my knowledge right now, is the least picked overclock for the grenade launcher. And I think that's mostly because we have 3 ammo overclocks for the grenade launcher with the RJ250 and the Pack Rat. And usually, if you wanted more crowd control and you wanted just a whole bunch of rounds, as well as utility, then RJ250 is generally a better option. As well as if you wanted more flexibility, Pack Rat, you could argue, is a better option too. That's not to say that the compact rounds isn't flexible though too. It's just that for me it makes a little bit more sense to go with a more damage option and go with Pack Rat, which has no downsides, rather than going with a damage option with this and then having the downside of not having very many rounds. That being said, I still enjoy this overclock, and the way that I usually build it is going with extra ammo in tier 1, extra ammo in tier 2. I usually go with incinerary compound in tier 3 really. This is just to spread out more fire damage and to kind of deal a bit more. I go with concussive blast in tier 4, and then usually I go with proximity trigger on this, although spiky grenade and disabled inertia are okay too. Since we took proximity trigger, we also get the slight bonus to our effect radius, so we're pretty much at the same base effect radius as the regular grenade launcher. Now, the RJ250 is a very unique and extremely fun overclock. What this does is it cuts your damage down, so you go from 110 to 75, so we lose out on a decent amount of damage there. Our maximum ammo is increased by quite a bit, and this is a percentage scale, so it goes up even higher if we take extra ammo. But right now we are at 13.6, so this will round up to 14. We have 14 rounds with our grenade launcher. And our reload time is quite a bit shorter. We no longer have a 2-second reload, we have a 1.4 second reload, and we get the RJ250 compound effect, which makes it so if you or an ally is jumping and this goes off near them, then it will fling you in the opposite direction of where the grenade went off. So you can use this for extra mobility, during waves to bounce yourself away from enemies. You can use it to bounce yourself up high, similar to kind of like how Scout's special powder works, or it feels like you can kind of play as Scout as Engineer, which is pretty useful. It's really good if you get fast at switching between this and the platform gun, because you can launch yourself up to a good position, put the platform there and land on it, or if you launch yourself a little bit too high, you can drop the platform down, land on that, and hopefully break your fall. Hopefully it's not too high up that you launch yourself. And you can also use this in some other objective situations where you can fling your teammates. So if you get the one machine event that is transport the explosives back to the area and throw them there, you can use this to bounce yourself closer to there, which is pretty nice. Or bounce your friends closer there. So they grab it, they jump up in the air, you launch them over there. This is a super fun overclock, but you do have to remember that every time that you shoot anywhere near you or your teammates, you still are doing damage to yourself or to your teammates. You will still take friendly fire damage from this. You can mitigate this, at least for friends. If you take the perk friendly, it won't work on you that same way though, because it doesn't count self-inflicted friendly fire damage. And the way that I usually build RJ250 is going with extra ammo in tier 1, extra ammo in tier 2. This gives us 20 rounds in total that we have to play with. That is a lot of extra grenades that we can use to fling ourselves or to just shoot into crowds. In tier 3, I go with the incinerary compound. This reduces our damage even further, so if you do use this to launch yourself, you're really not taking that much damage, and it's still pretty good against crowds. You're still dealing a lot of AoE damage in form of fire. Again, it's really good combined with any sort of fire effect. In tier 4, I go with concussive blast. This just gives us even more utility. Again, we're lighting stuff on fire, we're concussing everything. Makes it really easy for the team to pick off stuff, or our turrets to pick off stuff, or us to switch to our primary and then just pick off whatever might be remaining. And then in tier 5, it's really your choice. All of these are pretty decent options, besides maybe the proximity trigger. I wouldn't take proximity trigger with the RJ250, because if you do want to use it to launch yourself, you kind of have to know the timing of the grenade, and your grenade can't roll somewhere, so it's really inconsistent. I wouldn't really recommend that. Spiky grenade is still good because we're still doing direct damage, and this doesn't hurt us when we're jumping up in the air because we're not taking the direct damage from the grenade. It's not hitting us. It would be hitting whatever surface we're shooting it at. And the disabled inertia makes RJ250 a very wonky but very fun overclock to use. I mean, RJ250 is already super fun. This makes it more fun, but again, a little bit less consistent because our inertia, or because our movement speed is pretty much given to the RJ250 grenade, which is really bizarre. So if you like trying that, try it out. Usually I just go with spiky grenade because it's the most straightforward option, but I have seen some people do some really bizarre and very funny plays with the disabled inertia, so try that one out and see how you like it. Then we move on to our big boys here with our unstable overclocks, and these ones are vastly different but very, very fun. First up is Fat Boy. This just, you get to shoot nukes. This is like having the Fat Man in the Fallout games. You're firing mini nukes out of your launcher. Now, for this, you get massively increased damage. We go from 110 to 410, so that's a huge increase in damage. We lose out on a lot of ammo, though. We go from holding 8 rounds to holding 2 rounds, because again, this will round up or round down. In this case, it rounds down, and our effect radius is increased by a little bit, but our projectile speed is slower. So you do have to lob the grenade a bit more, at least at longer ranges, to use this. Now, for me, I pretty much use the nuke just for AoE damage to take care of crowds. You can build it to where it's really high single target damage, and it can work pretty well against like Praetorians or Oppressors or whatever big you want to hit a Dreadnought with it. It's pretty good. Then you're left with pretty much just holding about 2 rounds with the grenade launcher, and at that point you have, 1 grenade in the grenade launcher or 1 nuke in the grenade launcher, and then 2 extra nukes, and that's it. Every resupply you're getting like 1 nuke back. It's just not that great. So for me, the way that I build this is going with extra ammo on tier 1, extra ammo on tier 2. This gives us 4 rounds that we get, so we'll get at least 2 nukes back every time we get a resupply. In tier 3, I usually like going with the incinerary compound in this too. Even though it lowers our overall damage, having the radiation damage, burning everything, just dealing all that damage over time effect is pretty strong and will clear up hordes very fast. If you want this for single target damage, don't take this one. Take the armor breaking or the high velocity grenade. Both of those are better options then. In tier 4, I usually go with the nails and tape and have an even bigger explosion radius. I really like this for dealing even more damage to more stuff. Although, if you're building like this, or if you're building this overclock in general, be very careful with it because it's extremely easy to blow yourself up and to blow your teammates up. It's also easy to kill yourself or teammates with the lingering radiation damage too if people aren't paying attention and run into it. Just a whole lot of things potentially can go wrong with this. And this is one that I would probably recommend taking the passive perk friendly on, because I've seen plenty of people die from Fat Boy, and it's usually hilarious, but not always the best when it happens to the team. In tier 5, I usually build for Sticky Grenade. This is one I just feel the safest with. The disabled inertia field feels really weird with this, because it's already a slow moving projectile, and then it has your movement speed, so it feels really wonky. And Proximity Trigger is a fun but extremely dangerous overclock to use because your nuke might go off very close to you if there's an enemy that you didn't notice. So I don't recommend taking that one. I should also note with this particular overclock, you can mine with it as well. It's not very ammo efficient. It's not going to beat out like C4 mining or the EPC mining or anything like that. But you can mine with this, so if you really need to get nitra, or if there's just a really awkward spot where like a gold vein or a nitra vein or some sort of rare material that you need is, you can use it for this. Now, if you wanted to go for a full damage Fat Boy, you could take the HE compound, take the larger payload, have 600 area damage, which is a lot of damage. Go with the high velocity grenade, so your grenade isn't shooting very slow. Go with homebrew powder to potentially high roll your already insane damage, and then go with spiky grenade to have even more damage. This is if you wanted a full damage, full overkill, you're just trying to hit something really, really hard, and you don't care about the very low amount of ammo that you have. That's an option. You could also go full AoE, but full AoE is pretty dangerous with this one, and not something I would really recommend. And then our last overclock is Hyper Propellant. Now, this one pretty much turns your grenade launcher into a railgun, more or less. You have less ammo and way less AoE. Your grenade, pretty much wherever you hit is where the explosion is, and you're not really dealing any damage outside of that area, at least not any significant amount of damage. Now, your projectile velocity is increased by 350%, so you really don't need to lead your shot very much. Even at long ranges, your grenade does not drop very much, so pretty much just aim directly at what you want to hit and fire at it, and your direct damage skyrockets up to 385 damage. So whatever you do hit is definitely going to feel it. This is probably the single highest amount of damage you can do, at least per shot in the game, Currently, we don't know what the new secondaries are going to be, so there might be something that hits even harder than this. And there is a couple things that like the breach cutter can do where you might be able to hit higher damage points with that too. But for all intents and purposes, this is usually the most amount of direct damage. For this one, I like to build extra ammo in tier 1, so we go back up to 8 rounds. Extra ammo in tier 2, so we have 10 rounds in total. I go with the pressure wave in tier 3. You really don't want to go with the incinerary compound and cut our damage in half. This is just going to hinder our damage. The armor breaking is usually better, and the high velocity grenade, we don't need our projectile going at 630% faster than it already does. So yeah, the armor breaking just makes the most sense here in tier 3. In tier 4, I like taking the homebrew powder. This is so that we can potentially even high roll our damage further than what we already have. Really useful there. And then in tier 5, I go with spiky grenade. That way we get even more direct fire damage. So with this, you can use it pretty much like a sniper rifle. Just pick off anything big off in the distance. You can one-shot menaces with this, which is very useful. I think you have to hit them in the weak spot, though, either on either of their sides. It'll kill them with one hit. You can almost kill a spitballer from full health with this, too. I don't think it fully does, even if you high roll the grenade. I could be wrong. Maybe if you get like the max high roll on it, then you can, but most of the time it doesn't kill with one shot. I pretty much only use this for like Praetorians, Oppressors, Dreadnoughts, Menaces, Spitballers, stuff like that that's really big and has a lot of HP. Outside of that, I'm really never going to use this against any like small or medium enemies at all, because we just don't have enough grenades to use it, and it's definitely like way overkill for them. So this is the grenade launcher and all the builds that I use with it. Hopefully this kind of helped you guys out. Next up, we're going to be looking at the breach cutter, doing an updated guide on that, since I haven't done like updated guides for these ones in about a year now. So that'll be a lot of fun. Breach cutter is really cool too. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this, and this list is updated at the end of each month. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!